Hello, this is Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guest today is a renowned writer of television and film from Belgium. He was director Lucas Dant's co-writer on award-winning feature films Girl and Close. He's been a columnist for the Belgian newspaper De Standard, and The Edges is his debut novella. It's translated into English by Michelle Hutchison, and it's a tender story of love and longing. It's been translated into Spanish, French and German too, and it won the jury prize at the Prix Romanguet in France. Such an honour to have you in the studio. Angelo Tijssens, welcome to Meet the Writers.
Thank you so much. It's an honour to be here.
We're very, very pleased to get you in. Obviously, you don't live here, and it's wonderful to have somebody like you, of your stature, in film, in the studio with us. But I want to go back to the beginning, because this book, The Edges, is a sort of... it's not exactly a coming-out story, but it's about a young gay man. And you were a young gay man.
Once, yes.
In small-town Belgium. Tell me about that upbringing.
I grew up in Blankenberge, which, of course, you've never heard of. It's a small coastal town. It's really dead in autumn and in wintertime. And then during summer, the population, I think, doubles or triples. Seaside, seagulls, campings, cheap, smelly food, loud music, cheap booze. And then in the wintertime, it's abandoned. It's empty. It's almost ghost-like, because the dike near the sea is just full of hotels, which are empty during the wintertime. The beach is empty. And basically the sea and the salt attack everything that's still there, whether it's a concrete building or a small kid like I once was. And
I mean, this book, The Edges, is clearly set somewhere like that, although you don't tell us where. But the other big thing that struck me about it is that it is also about an abusive parent.
Yes.
Was that from your own life?
Yes, the whole cliche of you have to write about the stuff you know is very much true for, I think, everything I've ever written, but especially for this one. I grew up in a pretty violent household. A lot of abuse, both kids and the alcohol. I felt I didn't want to write... I didn't want to write a sad story. I wanted to, I think, use language to focus on the aftermath rather than just describing the facts, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of people might recognize the facts and they're not that relevant. I also decided not to write a biographical book about this is what happened and then that happened. It had to be about feeling, about remembering, about the loss of love or the feeling of being lost. And very important to me, it had to be fiction. It had to be fictionalized, because just telling the truth, I think, as an artist, is just not enough.
What was the truth, though?
The truth was worse, because the truth is impossible to summarize in, 129 pages. Yeah, a lot of alcohol abuse. So I remember being a very fearful child, being a very good liar in lying about what happened or what didn't happen. Or I used to, and I'm air quoting, fall a lot. I think I lived in fear. And of course, I think it's not the fear that, children in Gaza have to endure. It's completely different, because it's the fear of someone you're supposed to love or someone who's supposed to love you.
And this is your mother?
Yes. Yeah, my parents divorced when I was really young. Yes, that indeed is my mother. And I think that's one of the worst things, because there are no children's books about mommy hits me. I mean, maybe they exist, but they're not really popular. So there's no canon of, it's starting now, but there's no canon of, my name is Patrick and I fell in love with Paul in kindergarten. It just doesn't exist, or you're not seeing who you think you are around you. So you feel alone and lonely, and again, like an imposter, like you have to pretend to be someone else, like you're not afraid, like you're not in pain or alone. That pretending as a mechanism, something that I wanted to write about, and hoping people notice, but just not having the courage, the tools, the language to address what's happening, because it feels normal while it's happening. It feels like this is how life is, and at the same time, you know it's not normal because you're not talking about it, you're not addressing it, you're hiding bruises, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
How did you escape that?
Language was an important one. This is a podcast, you can't see me. I'm not really good at sports. So I went to the library, which was warm and safe and free. So I could read. I could literally disappear in stories. In Blankenberge, there was a railway station. And on one side, there was the library. And on the other side, there was a video library, like VHS tapes. So I literally disappeared between those two because I was too young to just take a train and leave. It was rather books or films.
And when you did take a train and leave, how did that come about and where did you go?
Not that far. I went to Bruges, which is literally an 11-minute train ride away. When I was 14, I went to high school in Bruges. It has a very artistic, the academy it's called. So you could train to be a painter or an architect, and I had a theatre training there. And immediately my world started changing because I had to leave the house a lot earlier. I was back a lot later. They had a really, really good library. Talking the end of the 1990s, they had every Wolfgang Tillmans book that existed on that moment. So it opened my world, both in stories and in images. Suddenly I was browsing through pictures of queer Berlin parties and thinking, oh, there is a world outside of this. I found Arthur Rimbaud and Nan Golden during that period where you think, those people feel like my family. So that disappearing in other people's stories and in books and in photography and film was, I think, a lifeboat.
And was coming out a process or an event?
It definitely wasn't an event. I always feel like I basically melted out of the closet because it didn't really feel like a problem to me. I never hated myself for being queer. I had so many other reasons. But it also, I didn't feel comfortable enough to just come out of the closet and go, ta-da, here I am. Because there was so much I wasn't shouting about. I was used to being a very discreet kid. I'm not anymore, though.
No, I can tell that. Yeah. You studied theatre at the Antwerp Conservatory?
Yes.
Tell us more about that. I mean, is that this, I presume, is part of you pretending you're taking it another step by being an actor? Yeah.
By the time I arrived there, it's in Antwerp, where I still live, so 2 hours by train, but a completely different world. It's the second largest city in Belgium. It's known for fashion and museums and restaurants, and so suddenly I was in a city. Something all of us queer kids do at a certain point. We disappear from whatever hole we grow up in, and we go to a city to find our peers. Going to drama school, we had I think then 80-year-old lady, Dora van der Groen, she was called, the godmother of Belgian theatre, and she was my teacher. And I think one of the most important things I learned, both about acting and creating art and living, is that you don't have to add, you have to take stuff away. Mm. She always described good artists as people who have who lose a layer of skin. So it's the world can literally penetrate easier through the flesh, through the bone, and that took a long time. She explained it, and I thought, yeah, she's right. And then it took me another 10 years to finally start feeling it, because I think it's something we always do. We think we have to literally pretend, and it just takes so much energy and time and all of that stuff you'd rather spend on just existing in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think that was for me, that was the most important thing that I learned in drama school.
And then you went on to work in film and TV as an actor.
Yeah, and in theatre as well. Yeah, mostly in theatre. Yeah.
You were part of the, I can't pronounce this.
Nobody can, it's fine. Ontroerend Goed, they're called. Yeah, it's a Ghent-based company. I was going to replace someone for a run here in London, in BAC, for 2 weeks. that kind of ran out of hand. So I spent 15 years with the company as an actor, as a writer, as a part of the artistic core, and traveled the world basically with newly devised, often interactive theatre.
And were you part of that writing process?
Yes. Again, I learned a lot there. Because with Ontroerend Goed, it often centers around the audience, not as much around the creators or the actors on stage or all that kind of. It's literally, what do we want the audience to know? What do we want the audience to feel? How do we use that live experience that is a theatre show? How do we use that time that we spend together in a room? Very often the shows that we created and that they're still creating, they don't exist without an audience. They really acknowledge the fact that other people are there, and I think that's something I took with me when I started writing films and books, just being aware that it's not for me.
But it's a very different thing, because with an audience, they're right there. You can judge their reaction. Yeah. When you're writing a film or a book, you just don't get that feedback, do you?
No, that's true. I've I'm going to sound like a madman here, but I have like a box of audience members. When I'm working with Lucas, we often say like, okay, but Hilde from Genk, which is a city in Belgium as well, will see this. She doesn't know what we intend to write. What do we want Hilde to know? We often use those exercises, not what do I want to tell, what do I want to talk about, which of course is where it starts. But that whole process of writing, of because you're basically inviting people to walk into a pitch dark room with you. You have to guide them. You can't switch on all the lights, because then the magic is gone. Mm-hmm. There's no thrill, there's no ride. So you have to like give them little nods and just push them and make them feel safe, but it still has to be exciting. It has to be like a roller coaster. You know you're strapped in, but still for that one moment you feel like you're about to fall. And that's what you have to try and find.
You've been fantastically successful in film. So Girl was your first feature film with Lucas Dont. It won the Camera d'Or, the Queer Palm, and lots of other awards. Nominated at Cannes, that is. It was nominated for a Golden Globe and a César. Tell us about that film.
You just did it. I was on tour. I was in Sydney. We were playing a show called Fight Night in the Sydney Theatre Company, and I got an email from a recently graduated film student called Lucas Dont, who had, and I'm quoting him, a very good idea for a film, and we had to meet. So I emailed him back, and I thought, well, let's see about that. And he had a massive folder of newspaper clippings and copies of interviews and conversations he had with the family of Nora Monsecourt, who is a trans dancer and was then in the ballet school in Antwerp. And he wanted to make a film about her, and then he was so enthusiastic, and I had already written 3 short films almost by accident, and again by accident they premiered in Cannes as well, and so I suddenly had some weird track record where I was, according to IMDb, I was a screenwriter. So I thought, yeah, well, let's see about that. And then we had the wonderful opportunity to work with Dirk Impens, who is a Belgian producer. He made a lot of very good films. By the time we started working with him, he already had a couple of Academy Award nominations. I mean, big shot. And the biggest gift that he gave us was that he cared a lot, but he didn't. So Lucas and I got to work, I think, for 3 years on that first screenplay. No one was waiting for us. No one really paid us. But I was still touring with shows. Lucas was doing a lot of small-time jobs. But we could talk and get to know each other and our material, and again take it away from what it really was, from the facts, and turn it into a piece of art. And that luxury of time is something that was such a gift to make that film. And then it exploded. And suddenly we were the first Flemish film since 1989 that was in the official selection in Cannes. And then indeed Queer Palm and the Caméra d'Or for Best Debut Feature, which is, I still think, one of the craziest awards that we ever won. Because you can only win it for your first feature, but you have to be at the Cannes Film Festival. So it's like the odds are really against you. And Miranda July won it, so I'm very always glad to be Miranda July's shadow. But then it just happened, and then we started writing Close, and then it was even crazier.
So, I mean, Close, I think, what was it, a 12-minute standing ovation it got?
Yeah, but I mean, I also have to admit, they push it. Like, they really push it. They show close-up footage, live footage of everyone, of the cast and crew, and everyone's crying, and they just really push it to have those long standing ovations.
Yeah. But it won the Grand Prix, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't push that, right?
I can't push that.
It won the biggest prize of the festival.
The second biggest. We didn't win the Palme d'Or. Yet. Yeah.
I know that you're working on another film at the moment, but suddenly here you are, a filmmaker, an actor, and now you're also a published author of books.
Yes, imagine that.
So, thank you, firstly, for keeping it to novella size.
Yeah, I don't like wasting people's time.
Well, I mean, it's very spare. The writing is spare. As you say, you've stripped away anything that's not needed. But what you've left us with is this essence, this eerie essence of this deserted seaside town, this horribly abused boy, this mishmash of feelings and wonderful little vignettes of all sorts of things that come together to make up this tiny but, small but perfectly formed novella, The Edges. You were talking about how it's based on your own life, but it's not your own life. Uh-huh. Was it cathartic?
No. It was material. It was stuff that's in the stuff that's literally the closet. Stuff I can work with. I mean, we talked about Girl. That's about a person who just does not feel comfortable with their body. Been there, done that. Close is about not allowing yourself to be close to people for whatever reason. Well, here's another autobiographical work. This is I think closest to my skin, but I for me, therapeutic writing, it just doesn't work. I don't think you can write about fire when you're burning. It has to be over. I have to be in a safe position to be able to have that distance and to distill it to its essence. Because again, facts are irrelevant. I have to be able to truthfully lie about it in order to get closer to another kind of truth. A piece of art, whether it's a book or a film, has its own truth. And when I'm still too much feeling it myself, then I can't allow other people to feel it.
But you let us feel various things like the wind, cycling in the wind and the rain. We really feel that. We smell things. You're fantastically evocative with odour.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why this had to be literature and it couldn't be film. Because when you're writing a screenplay, you really have to follow the rules. You can't smell in a film. You can see someone smelling a banana. Someone can say that it smells like shit, but you can't smell.
Yeah.
In a film, you also can't think. And you can't travel through time unless you have different sets or different actors. While in one sentence, I can just make you smell and think and feel and touch and feel different temperatures and be wet. And I can really crawl inside your head when I'm writing literature. And
so if you're writing films and asking what does Hilda from small town Belgium need to know, how does that process then work with a book?
It's the same. That for me is the same. You just have much more tools in the toolbox, I think. You can do anything. Well, if I make a really small choice in a screenplay, it just costs 50,000 euros extra. If you want to have a passing train in the distance, well, here I can just write. I mean, if I want to add dragons, I can. I wouldn't, but I could do that. I'm allowed to do that. So it's that freedom, but also that the use of different perspectives, like the edges. I use two different perspectives. Instead of talking in a flashback style, you just switch from first to second person. So there's literally a me and a you in the book, and those vignettes, as you kindly call them, interact with each other, and they're basically the same person. Another reason why this can't be a film, because I would have to have two actors, and in the book they're the same person.
They are exactly the same person, and a person that we feel so much empathy towards.
Thank you.
A person who's clearly really damaged but is working their way through it. There's a box of shells in the book which just becomes tremendously important. Tell me about shells, what they mean to you and what they mean in this book.
Well, I had a box of shells when I grew up. Again, I grew up near the seaside, so it's almost a logical thing to do, to pick them up or look at them or collect them. They're dead. They're whatever's left of a dead creature, but they're beautiful and we admire them. And as humans, we've always been admiring them. We've turned them into necklaces and bracelets and wonderful pieces of art, even before we became sedentary. I mean, we've been very interested in shells and in the mother of pearl on the inside.
Oh my goodness, I'm never going to look at a shell the same way again, though. We are literally wearing corpses of sea creatures.
Yeah, but the outer shell. And that's something, because it's all that remains is the outer shell. The whatever had to protect those creatures from the elements or predators, that's what remains, not what's inside.
And that reflects so much about the character in
Yes.
the book, because he's had to build his shell, hasn't he?
Yeah. That is true, yeah.
Yeah. Extraordinary. I know you've got a new book out. It's not yet in English.
Not yet, no.
Tell me about that book.
That book is, and I'm roughly translating here, called The End of the Street, which is about a young painter who's married to a man, and they live in that man's parents' house in the outskirts of the city, the suburbs, basically. And he doesn't know what to paint. He's, again, lonely, is looking for a subject, looking for, I don't know, things to look at. Feels isolated in an architecture that really wasn't built for him. I mean, those 1960s and 70s villas really weren't made for two men. They live in a street where everyone's just a heteronormative couple and they have 1.75 kids and 2.1 cars per household. And he starts to look at the world and paint while it stops raining during one very hot summer, where you follow a painter who's trying to paint and becomes obsessed with the delivery man who brings his empty canvases.
I know that during the writing of that book, you were subject to a homophobic attack.
Yes. I'm such a joyous person. Yes. I was literally standing on the corner of my street, to the end of my street, waiting for a tram to go to the city centre to buy more Christmas lights.
How gay is that?
How gay is that? I'm going to make it even worse. I just had my nails done, so they were beautifully glittery green, and I was wearing a beautiful baby pink Raf Simons coat, which is enough for some people to just walk up to you and hit you in the face. So yeah, that happened. And that really shook me, because as we've talked about before, I know violence, but I felt now in that big city, the end of my street, where I know the name of the people who work at the bakery in the corner of my street and all my neighbors, I thought I was safe. I felt safe. I think I'd left my shell at home, but apparently shouldn't have. That one really kicked in every sense of the word. But it took me a while, took me some time to place that, because there's hardly any violence that makes sense, but this really did make sense. And that constant danger, that feeling threatened, even if you're not, that it's a feeling that, oddly enough, I was already writing about. I was already writing the novel when that happened.
And how did it affect your writing?
I wrote an essay about allowing myself to be a victim for the newspaper. That really worked. because I knew people or press wanted to talk about what happened. But again, I wanted to be in control. I wanted to have my own narrative and not just be a victim, but talk about bystanders and about the language we use in media and in politics when we talk about other people. And by other people, I mean everyone who's not the norm, whether you're queer or a refugee or a woman or someone with a disability, or basically us, the majority. I wanted to talk about that language. And so luckily the newspaper just gave me a full spread to try and address that. And then I talked a lot to very good psychologists. And again, learned that I was in charge of my own narrative.
And your narrative from what really was a very sad beginning is now utterly different. I wonder if to wrap up, you could just give us a snapshot of your life, because here you are, you're happily married, you live with your husband in Antwerp, you're this incredible film writer, much lauded in your home country and abroad. You've now come out with these novels, you're still an actor, you're doing all of this stuff. It just sounds like this is a complete fairy tale ending.
Yeah, it's not. Along the way, there were people who I think saw me and people who I could be honest with, where I didn't have to pretend, and that took courage from me, but from them as well. I mean, I literally was damaged goods. I still am. I'll always be, and that's fine, but at least I'm glittery damaged goods now. And I think by meeting the right people and, like I said before, learning or allowing myself to be vulnerable and being able to talk about that, I now make my money by being vulnerable. That is, I think, a superpower that I never knew existed.
Well, long may you continue.
Thank you.
Angelo Tijssens, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Edges is published by Daunt Books. It's translated by Michelle Hutchinson, and it's out now. You've been listening to Meet the Writers, thanks to the production team of Steph Jungu, Maisie Ringer and Flynn Simons. And you can download this show and previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.